In the night sky over southern Russia, a strange orange glow was lit not by the aurora borealis, but by something much more violent. On the night of October 19, 2025, Ukrainian long-range drones flew deeper into Russia than ever before, traveling more than 1,400 kilometers from the border. The target was not a military base or a conventional ammunition depot. It was the Orinberg gas processing complex, Russia's largest and most important gas facility, located close to the border with Kazakhstan. The scale of the attack was staggering. A swarm of low-flying drones had overcome Russia's entire air defense system, which Moscow had once boasted was impenetrable. Moments later, massive explosions ripped through the complex. Flames shot hundreds of meters into the air. And just like that, one of the world's largest energy facilities, the heart of Russia's gas empire, was gone. What made this attack different was not just the target, but what it represented. For years, Putin has cultivated the illusion that Russia's inland industrial zones, especially those beyond the Ural Mountains, were impregnable. Orenburg was a symbol of that illusion. Located more than 1,500 kilometers from Kiev, it was supposed to be safe, out of range of Western-supplied missiles. But Ukraine's new generation of AI-powered long-range drones has changed that calculation forever. According to Ukrainian military intelligence reports, the operation was the result of a joint operation between special forces and a Russian resistance group called Black Spark. Together, they targeted not only the Orenburg complex, but also the nearby Novokibashevsk refinery, one of Russia's most important oil facilities. The twin attacks caused massive devastation. They didn't just start fires, they also crippled the foundation of Russia's energy system. Within hours, Moscow was forced to halt all gas imports from Kazakhstan, an ally it had relied on for decades. The Kazakh Ministry of Energy declared a national emergency. Production was suspended, pipelines were closed, and oil exports to Russia were halted. What Ukraine had done was more than just destroy a plant. It had severed an economic lifeline connecting Russia to its last friendly neighbor in Central Asia. To understand the seriousness of this attack, we need to understand what Orenburg actually is. It is not just a refinery. It is the largest gas processing plant on the planet, operated by Gazprom Parabotka, a subsidiary of Russian energy giant Gazprom. It refines, separates, and converts raw gas from Russian fields and Kazakhstan's giant Karachaganak field into usable fuels and chemicals. Put simply, Orenburg is the brain of Russia's gas network. Without it, raw gas pumped from the ground is useless. It cannot be processed or distributed. Striking this facility would be like, put simply, Orenburg is the brain of Russia's gas network. Without it, raw gas pumped from the ground is useless. It cannot be processed or distributed. Striking this facility would be like cutting the spinal cord of Russia's energy system. The entire network, from pipelines to storage centers, depends on this single node functioning. And this is where the attack deepens. For decades, Orenburg handled gas flowing directly from Kazakhstan to Russia. Under Soviet-era agreements, Kazakhstan was not allowed to build its own processing facility. It was forced to rely on Russia. That meant billions in revenue for Gazprom and deepening Kazakhstan's dependence. Now, with the facility destroyed, that dependence has turned into a nightmare for both sides. What makes this attack so important is the strategic precision behind it. Ukraine did not attack a random target. It attacked a single facility that sits at the intersection of Russia's domestic energy grid and Central Asian trade links. In doing so, it achieved several things at once. It disrupted Russia's domestic gas supply at the start of winter. It cut off energy cooperation with Kazakhstan. It undermined Gazprom's financial stability. And it exposed the complete failure of Russia's air defense network. Reports from local sources suggest that the attack used autonomous drones equipped with AI navigation, flying low and following terrain, river valleys, industrial corridors, completely bypassing radar coverage. This was no fluke. It was a deliberate test, and it proved that Russia's most advanced defense systems like the S-400 and Panzer are essentially blind to modern swarm drones. The Ukrainian General Staff later confirmed that the gas scrubber unit, the central processing brain of Orinberg, had been hit head-on. Without that single system, the rest of the complex was nothing more than twisted metal. The reaction in Moscow was one of utter panic. Reports from Reuters and RBC Ukraine said that within hours of the explosions, the Kremlin and the Kazakh government in Astana held emergency meetings. For Putin, this was more than a military humiliation. It was the symbolic collapse of his once proud energy fortress. The gas pipelines that once gave Moscow leverage over Europe were now fragile and vulnerable. Just a week earlier, Forbes Russia reported that Gazprom was already the country's most indebted company, drowning in debts of more than 6 trillion rubles, or about $60 billion. Now it faces an impossible task of rebuilding a facility that took decades to build and costs billions to maintain. Even if Russia could rebuild, it would lack the Western technology and materials used in these high-pressure gas systems. Sanctions have cut off critical components and advanced turbines. So, in all practical terms, the Orenburg complex is gone forever. And with it, Russia's illusion of economic stability. The economic shock was immediate. Gas prices within Russia skyrocketed overnight. Fuel shortages spread across the Volga region. Refineries that depend on Orenburg processed gas were shut down. Kazakhstan was also affected, but its government quickly sought to distance itself from Moscow. In an emergency speech, the Kazakh Energy Ministry announced that it was reassessing its long-term cooperation with Russian infrastructure. Politically, Astana had just moved further away from the Kremlin's orbit. It was a genuine victory for Ukraine, a masterstroke of geopolitics delivered with just a few drones and perfectly timed. For years, Putin's entire Eurasian strategy, through organizations like the CSTO and the Eurasian Economic Union, had relied on Kazakhstan as the fulcrum of Central Asia. Now that fulcrum was slipping away from Moscow. In closed-door meetings revealed by regional media, Kazakh officials expressed outrage that Russia's war had plunged the country into chaos. Their exports were stagnant, their gas revenues had vanished overnight, and their supposed protector, Russia, couldn't even defend itself. For decades, Russia's global image has rested on a single pillar: energy dominance. Gas to Europe, oil to Asia, pipelines spanning continents. Putin weaponized that energy, using it as a tool of blackmail in the early stages of his war to punish Europe. He believed it made Russia invulnerable. But after this attack, the myth of the energy superpower was over. According to the new Voice of Ukraine, Russia now risks having to import 60% of its refined fuel by the end of 2025. Think about that. A country that once exported energy to half the world may soon run out of fuel to run its own tanks. Inside Russia, the psychological impact of the Orenburg attack has been devastating. For months, state television has been saying that war was far away, that everyday life was safe and normal. Now, ordinary Russians are watching their own gas empire burn. In cities like Samara, Kazan, and Orenburg itself, lines formed at gas stations. Rationing began. Fuel coupons returned, reminiscent of the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Industrial production slowed. Heating systems broke down. Even the military's logistics network, heavily dependent on natural gas and diesel, began to suffer. Putin can still command loyalty through propaganda, but propaganda cannot heat homes or fill tanks in Kazakhstan. The attack was a turning point and a warning. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's government had been walking a fine line since the war began, officially neutral, but quietly supplying Russia with spare parts and fuel. Now that quiet cooperation has exploded, literally, with Kazakhstan's gas fields unable to export without Russian processing. Production is collapsing. Billions of dollars in lost revenue are piling up, and this has sparked a political debate among Kazakhstan's elite. Should they continue to tie their future to Moscow or move closer to the West and China? Ukraine's message is clear. Doing business with Russia now comes at a cost, and that cost is instability. The destruction of the Orenburg complex affects more than just Russia or Kazakhstan. It upends the energy map of Eurasia. European analysts from the Wilson Center and Energy Intelligence Group estimate that this single attack could knock out as much as 5% of global gas processing capacity for months to come, a shock that would affect prices worldwide. But the geopolitical implications run deeper. As Kazakhstan falters and Russia sinks deeper into trouble, China finds itself in a difficult position. Beijing has poured huge sums into pipelines and energy infrastructure in Central Asia. Now its key northern partner is literally on fire. For the first time, Chinese leaders are beginning to wonder whether Russia is still a reliable anchor in its Belt and Road network. While Moscow struggles to contain the fallout, Ukraine is sending a clear message to all of Russia's allies. Linking with the Kremlin is now a liability. This campaign marks a new phase in the conflict. The battle lines are no longer physical. They are economic, industrial, and psychological. Ukraine has proven that drones can replace divisions, that economic paralysis can achieve what artillery cannot. Every attack on an oil depot, refinery, or gas plant weakens Russia's ability to wage war. And more importantly, it weakens Putin's control over his allies and his own citizens. For decades, he has assured Russians that their vast territory made them virtually invincible, that no enemy could reach their core. But tonight at Orenburg, that illusion was in ruins. Rebuilding Orenburg could take years, even decades if things go slowly. Experts predict the cost could exceed $10 billion, and that's assuming Russia can find the components, a near impossibility under the current tightening sanctions. Without Orenburg, Russia would struggle to handle both its own gas and exports from Kazakhstan. That would mean lower production, lower revenues, and more pressure on an economy already severely fractured by sanctions. In the long run, this attack will accelerate Russia's financial and diplomatic isolation. Kazakhstan, Armenia, and other CSTO countries will think twice before aligning with a country that cannot protect its own infrastructure. And while Putin tries to project strength on television, behind closed doors, the reality is much darker. He is losing not just territory, but also allies, industry, and prestige. What Ukraine achieved on the night of October 19 was more than a military victory. It was a geopolitical game played at the highest level. A few autonomous drones, costing less than a single Russian missile, caused billions of dollars in damage, crippled Gazprom, humiliated the Kremlin, and fractured its alliance with Kazakhstan. The Orenburg attack will be studied for years to come as the moment economic warfare overtook traditional combat. It was a blow that turned pipelines into pressure points and allies into liability. Some fires do not die with the ashes, but burn forever in the memories of those who started them. As winter draws in, the flames of Orenburg will still smolder in the Kremlin's nightmares. A grim reminder that in this war, Ukraine has learned not just how to fight, but how to overcome its enemies with wit and determination. Putin once vowed that Russia's vast resources would be an impregnable shield, that his empire was built on the solid foundation of oil and gas. But now those same resources are turning against him, explosion by explosion, like the final blow of an era. Ukraine didn't just blow up a gas plant, it struck a symbol of pride, a spiritual core that Moscow believed was imperishable, and exposed the naked fragility that lay beneath that mighty shell. As the lights of the Russian steppe flicker in the winter night and the pipes dry up, one truth echoes in the silence. The war Putin started has finally come home to roost. On the war map, the line between offense and defense is blurring. Russia's moves are still largely unknown, while Ukraine, exhausted as it is, seems to be preparing for something bigger than the world has ever seen. Reports from the front suggest that a brutal winter may be approaching. No one knows exactly who is controlling the battle, only that all sides are calculating in silence. Behind the diplomatic statements are secret moves, plans never made public. And with each passing day, the world moves closer to a new dangerous threshold. Is this just the lull before the storm, or the beginning of an escalation not seen since World War II? The answer, perhaps, will soon be revealed. We will continue to monitor and update the latest developments. Don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes just one news you miss today can be the turning point of the whole war tomorrow.